Welcome to Isn't It Obvious, where things are obvious. That's going to be the intro.
That's going to be the intro forever now.
Right.
Fallout is really just an allegory of where unfettered capitalism will
No,
go.
that was not Fallout. That was BioShock.
Why are you guys always bringing
No.
Fallout into this?
Fallout just becomes more and more true.
Sounds like you're just playing a lot of Fallout to me.
That's fair. Hello, and welcome to Isn't It Obvious? I'm your host, Micah, with Sera and Phil.
Hey.
And today's topic, I ask thee and thine, isn't it obvious that we should not have internationally recognized borders?
I am so down for this.
We should just have, it's all regional taxes, and where money is spent is just put back into that region.
Yeah.
But there are no set borders. There's just international tax revenue that takes all sales in and sends it back out, but you can go anywhere. There are just no borders.
Yeah, let's abolish the states. Forget it. Just get rid of them.
States, countries, everything.
Yep, forget it. We're just all
the
one.
world is the world.
We are the world nation.
We are the world.
We're like
Wait, no, it's my topic. I can't railroad.
We're the Imagine song.
Imagine Dragons?
No,
No, they're from the 70s.
Lennon.
80s?
I think that's 70s.
90s?
I don't remember.
You're just setting a perfect circle, so.
But that's true. That's the first time I heard that song because that's definitely my favorite band. I'm like, oh, that's a cover of this song? Oh, cool. And then I listened to the original and it was just as good. Okay, well, whatever, you guys. I like music. You guys are just
How could
haters.
the Perfect
It's fine.
Circle be your favorite band?
I just think John Lennon's overrated.
I wouldn't say A Perfect Circle is my favorite band ever, but I really like Maynard's voice. That's why.
fair enough.
That's a fuck ton of qualifiers. Yeah. What's your favorite band ever if A Perfect Circle isn't your favorite band ever?
I mean, that's fair. I don't really have one. I just really like music in general.
Also, why isn't it Streetlight Manifesto?
What?
Why is it not Streetlight Manifesto? The best band ever.
Wait,
ever.
Micah, is that your
Ever.
favorite
I'll go 5.
band ever?
Oh, fuck yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Fucking amazing.
Okay.
Name a song.
From which album?
I don't care.
First, second,
just
third,
name,
cover album
name
1,
your
cover album
favorite
2.
song that they did.
Moment of Silence is pretty good. That's old. It hasn't really grown on me. Well, it's grown away from me. But Moment of Silence paired with Moment of Violence is really good. KTB Nights is pretty solid. Somewhere in between Peter's
Pick
Out.
one song to have as your theme song. That's what I'm asking.
The three of us.
Okay. Do you have a theme song, Phil?
I don't have a favorite ever band.
Do you have a song?
No, but favorite ever is different from favorite ever.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Qualifiers
Okay,
matter.
my favorite ever would be the person who did Claire de Lune.
Oh,
Yeah,
Debussy?
right. That's my favorite
yeah.
ever.
That's not a band. That's
But
composer.
it's not.
It's different.
Yeah, it's not
Composer.
a band, but that's my favorite.
Yeah.
Ever.
Composer's different. Someone who arranges music is different than someone who performs music.
One song by Debussy that I really like. I wish I could remember. That was
Merging into traffic.
No, it was like Qui l'a fait du something. Ugh, I don't know. We sang it in choir once, but like there was like this part of that song that was just so cool at the end. He's a great composer, so kudos.
I always thought that he was a she for like the longest time until just now. So that's how much I know about him or her. Okay.
At the time, they might have preferred a they. Who knows?
You see, that is you. About the first question that I have for you, Micah and Sarah, about international borders should not exist. Like, what would you do, just out of curiosity, about the massive influx of economic refugees that go to prosperous countries and nations if borders didn't exist?
There would be a greater incentive to invest in areas other than where that influx of people might be.
The problem is the flip switch problem, where the moment you flip the switch, now you begin the game. And now the game is that you're going to have tons of people migrating right away.
Right. So if you have this giant exodus from
all the wealthy people are going to take their money and their properties and they're going to pick up and leave these really high populated areas and they're going to be like, bye, and then they're going to go to these places that there are no people and then they're going to set up shop there and have
And
lots
where are
of
they going
land.
to spend their money if their money is only spent regionally?
Well, it doesn't matter because there's no borders, so they can just have things shipped to their house via Amazon.
They're going to use the system to break the system.
Yeah.
But the system doesn't exist for them to break.
What if they use the regional money to buy all the arms and goods that they would want to protect their industry, and then to ship it to, like, the middle of nowhere, and now that's the new place? Okay, let's say that you've planned this out for 50 years before the flip switch date occurred, so that now there is a huge incentive for many countries to start getting areas that are like just terrible and squalor to be up to code because they don't want like a massive...
Yeah, give those sad farming villages some running water and then give them some infrastructure and you can have a whole new set, like a whole big expanding economy to feed into the monster.
And you diversify it because it's not localized in, air quotes, first world countries.
So what's to prevent...
Because every country has the same standard because there is no border between them.
Okay, so what's to prevent a group of people, like say, I don't know, Belgium? This city is no longer going to accept people wandering in. We're going to make our own hard border. We're going to arm ourselves, and you need to be able to talk to the local elderman if you want to have access in.
Nuke.
It'll be just like how Japan, we're going to close off all our borders and only the Dutch can come into this one port.
Yeah. What's to prevent them from doing that?
Well, overwhelming international military force.
Well,
okay.
Overwhelming, like, lack of resources, most likely.
Yeah, if they put up hard borders, they are not going to be
They'd
traded
have to
with.
be completely self-sufficient. That's
You're in the system or you're out of the system.
Yeah, the system is the entire world. If you're going to be like your own little island, well, you're really just hurting yourself at that point.
Hopefully you're self-sufficient enough to have industry, agriculture, and modernity to close yourself off.
Yep.
Which, sure, they'll have some enclaves of that, but it'll be unsustainable.
Let's just say, like, like cell phones, like, if you're not part of the whole conglomerate, like, you'd have to have your own satellites up there or however you want to, walkie-talkies, I don't know. Like, you'll have to have your own system in place for conversation. You'd be completely...
We'll reroute rivers? I'm talking about total dystopian shit, man.
You just wouldn't work.
So let's say that, based off game theory, you have to join in because if you want to become a hermit kingdom, it's really not good for you or your people. And everyone just cites North Korea for that. So for some reason, you don't even have to use military force because all the 99 other countries are playing into this game too. They don't want to lose out. You guys have like a several decade timer so you don't hit this huge refugee crisis of economic migrants coming in to upheave the current delicate situation that is our economic balance. So you give time to prop up these other countries. How do you prop up these other countries without ruining them? One of the issues with just dumping in grains of rice or wheat or whatever it is to be able to prop up a country in Sub-Saharan Africa is you ruin the local economy there because now you just subsidized their wheat and you crash their market. They have a healthy auto market there.
But they wouldn't have, like, their market would still be the international market. In fact, it'd be expanded more, so though everything is regional, it is all still based on a coexistence of the whole.
Okay, but what I'm saying is each of the regionless regions, no borders, they would have to produce some sort of income in order to buy goods and services. So they have to have some industry of some kind.
Yeah, they have to have some good that they can produce to sell to the rest of the world on an equal footing to make this work.
But if they have nothing right now, then how can they start from nothing with something to be... Otherwise, when you flip the switch on, they have nothing, but they still have access to the market. They don't have any gold to exchange for goods and services. They would just be screwed as before. Maybe even more so.
Technically, America hasn't traded gold for anything in the last 50 years.
Gold is just the metaphor for, like, whatever. Bitcoin, whatever.
Lingua franca.
So I'm not sure how this would work because I haven't really thought this long and hard about it, but I would assume the first step would be putting in infrastructure to, get the standard of living and the ease of living up. So people aren't in the areas that are poor, that don't have running water, that don't have plumbing, that don't have a sewage system, like things like that. That would be the first step. You have to take in the whole, ecology, not just the economy, the ecology of the area. Because you don't want to totally destroy the environment by, tearing up the ground, putting in sewer systems, you got to think about that too. And you're also dealing with a culture shift because you're bringing people up to code, which is a different standard of living.
To establish parameters on this thought experiment, we're saying that in 2070, borders won't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It'll just be regional areas where money spent there is reinvested back in.
So, EU supersize. Okay.
So there are still regions, there are still cultural centers, you still have
cities.
The society aspect. It's just economically, there are no borders between them. And I guess,
we're all on the same currency and we're all on the same...
Yeah. In the 50 years, you're establishing an international currency, you're establishing international bureaucracy, but every country becomes a state.
Mm-hmm.
Type thing to deal with the American model.
Yeah, what the European Union is trying to mimic the American model, and the American model is just trying to mimic anarchy. Got it.
Cries. Why would anyone
sure. Let's run
copy
with it.
us?
We got 50
Why
years.
would
We can hammer out the
anyone-
details.
Why would anyone copy us?
So here's
Dumb
the
idea.
thing, though. If you have a common currency, a common bureaucracy would just make trade a lot easier. I agree with that 100,000%. One standard for electrical sockets, one standard for how much voltage and amps should be in this component. Yeah, great, good stuff.
Railways.
You don't have to follow like 10 different CE marks because it's like, what the hell is going on here? It'll be easier to do business for sure. One of the things that I don't like about common currency, though, is that state, just like Mississippi and Arkansas for us, don't have the ability to ramp up or ramp down monetary supply. The best example is Greece in the early 2000s, where they were just hemorrhaging money. And so they couldn't be able to... One of the ways they could do it is, establish fiat currency, use the Drona? I forgot what it was called before they went to the euro. And they would be able to print more, but then at the same time would be able to level off. But they can't do that now because they're in the common currency of the euro. So they lost the one quiver in their arrow. So then they had to suffer through years of austerity and humiliation, and Germans were upset.
But they also had horribly negotiated pensions for like every citizen, and they had bad economic plans in place that was going to bankrupt them.
But I mean, even in the States right here, we're having the money printing machine go BERT, right? The problem with like a machine gun style, let's print money, is quantitative easing that allows the pain to be subdued to a certain point. Obviously, you can't do it forever because that's just inflation then. But we're able to pull that lever pretty hard when you need to because we're really stupid with money for some goddamn reason. And this is apparently the best idea we have.
Because money's a fiction and doesn't mean anything, and it's just a bunch of numbers. Yep. Nobody's going to collect on our trillions of debt. Trillions of dollars of debt. Ever. So it doesn't matter if we have more.
If we didn't have that option to make money pretend, because now we actually have money real, because it's a common currency, and we don't have the ability to just make it.
But now we reform what the currency is in terms of what your production and contribution to the society at large is. And that can span many facets, unlike capitalism now, which is only based on production commodities.
If you peg everything to a common currency, you're going to have unforeseen problems of instability, and you remove tools to be able to load level how much you owe and how much relief you can give to your people. All these stimulus packages that we had here in the States is only possible because we can print. But Greece didn't have that option, so they were screwed. China does the same thing. They want to devalue their currency to manipulate the markets, but they do this because it's the most stable option for them, even though they're playing the game perhaps too well. If you have a common currency, you run the risk of some countries just being fair and fine, other countries not able to absorb shocks of like a famine or just bad economic timing, and one of the biggest tools in their arsenal are now gone. So now they're going to suffer like Greece with austerity, and then you're still going to have...
But in those situations, like if we had a global currency and another country was experiencing a Greece economic collapse, essentially, which they were near collapse, is that not, because everybody is on a common currency, a greater point for investment from those that have? So you will be able to have that influx from other avenues to build up that region. If you're not held back by bureaucratic disparages between law and trade, because all of that is on the same level.
I think investment is the key word. That's the reason why they got into a huge snafu that they did. When they went to common currency and they went to the EU standard, Greece's credit rating went from garbage to passable, because suddenly it's not just Greece that's held liable to the euro, it's all the other euro nations as well, cough, France, and Germany. So if Greece went under, then you're going to have a crisis in your hands because you'll have a runoff on the banks. So many companies were like, hey, let's invest in Greece. And Greece is like, hey, let's take free money. I mean, obviously there's more complicated than this for sure. But what happened is that their interest rates were lower and their line of credit was much higher. Well, a normal, sane government would take this and be able to use it for smart risks for good investments. A crazy country would use it to enrich themselves and practice corruption of unseen proportions and not actually collect revenue from their citizens, while also raising the standard of living to their populace. But who's complaining? Because no one's literate in math and economics. So everyone there for the first 10 years or so are like, everything seems great. Everything's fantastic. Everyone has jobs, even if it's just for me to stare at paint, until it comes time to pay your first bill. And then that's when things fall apart. Now, the people who gave them credit, like some of them never got their money back. And that's all the game of risk and reward. But they knew that, well, you know what? If these guys default, then Italy's going to go next, then Spain, and then suddenly all of the European Union is going to be in trouble. So who's going to bail them out? Well, Angela Merkel bails them out. Now, all of this could have been avoided had Greece said, no, what, we can print our own money. Then who and what sensible company is going to invest in that? Very few people, because then they're going to be like, well, Greece's way out is that they can just devalue themselves. They can just go into hyperinflation, and now the thing that they owe me is worthless.
But was Greece able to do that when they joined the EU?
They used to be able to do that, but then once they joined the EU...
Yeah, because they didn't have the common currency. So you wouldn't have that exploit in place because everybody's on a common currency. So you'd have a central treasury that would mandate how that money is printed. So you wouldn't be able to have those runs. You wouldn't be able to have China artificially augmenting what their value of their currency is worth.
And you wouldn't have people in charge, in theory, who would be able to just take the money and run. There wouldn't be that.
Because where are they going to run?
There wouldn't be the same type of corruption.
The sovereign realm of Belgium?
The sovereign realm of Belgium.
That went all Attack on Titan and just giant walls around their government center and then their industrial area and then their agricultural.
So tricky.
Belgium is ruining everything for us here with our common currency, common bureaucracy.
We just have to make 60-foot tall mutant giants that survive off the sun and eat people whole.
And waffles. I'm sorry, I had to throw it in there. I had to. I'm sorry.
60-foot high waffles.
Okay. That's just one example if I could think of something that's like, wait a minute. Right. The EU is doing this right now, and they have problems right now because they can't trust their...
Right, because it's one of the first times where you're trying to integrate multiple economies and multiple separate currencies into one thing, and there are growing pains.
So imagine that in Europe where they're contiguous to some extent, and for the most part, their industries are not so far away from each other. It's not like United Kingdom and North Korea, for a better example. Right? Like the economies are just totally separated by too many degrees of standard deviations to be able to assume that they're in even the same ballpark. So let's say by 2077, that they have like a joined time where every monetary currency and bureaucracy is standardized and infrastructure is created for all these other used to be nation states to actually have a modern infrastructure. Even then, it doesn't make sense because those modern industries in those modern used to be countries still have to produce a good, and they still need to be able to invest using that same dollar, but that dollar will start to fluctuate in what it's being used for because the regions are so wildly different. It starts to fall apart.
What country doesn't produce anything?
North Korea?
Currently.
Sealand. And the only thing they produce is...
misery of aquatic animals?
You can buy royalty. Like, you can buy citizenship, and they sell it.
Say Sealand or
Sealand?
Sealand.
The Scientology country on the sea land.
No, it's the big oil tanker that was abandoned, and some guy just decided to declare himself independent, and no one stopped him, so... He's like, I'm a country now.
That's like where the Pirate Bay was located. Pirate Bay was located on a derelict oil rig outside of, or in international waters. That's how they got around copyright.
So this is the plot of Metal Gear Solid 5, just so you guys say.
Yeah, basically. Well, yeah, it was 5, wasn't it? With the Seychelles and...
Outer Heaven.
Outer Heaven?
Yep.
God, I want to play that game again.
Okay, yeah, I think that the problem is that it would just quickly fall apart because there's just too many variety of industries and regions, and they're not going to all agree on the same thing about what the monetary policy is going to be.
Again, overwhelming military might.
Who's overwhelming military might?
No, if you think about it, the United Nations has, 178 members? 192 members out of 220 countries?
It has a lot.
So, right there, you have central bureaucracy already set up. You have a means of which all of these regions can communicate with each other. So, if you started with that, and throughout this 50 years, up until 2077, you start incorporating countries into the United Nations of the world. And we take steps towards a global government. If the planet Earth ever becomes one singular government, are we going to have multiple currencies? Does it make any sense to have multiple currencies in that situation?
I mean, we kind of already have multiple currencies in the United States as it is. Not just from bartering, but...
ass, grass, or shit. What's that stupid?
That's exactly what I was thinking of, too. Right? Like, we don't just use for 99.9% of transactions. It's going to be cash or Venmo or whatever it is that the young people use these days.
Or whatever the fuck is on a
But more and more people would prefer to get away from centralized economies. They want to be decentralized, and they want to have the idea of one of those dog coins.
To breed exploitation so they can benefit off of their saying it's worth this much. You have to buy it at this much because that's
right.
What
I mean, the same as commodities, as oil or even water. People can name their price.
Sure. If you don't have OPEC with the oil, the standard cost for a barrel of oil be better or worse if OPEC didn't exist?
Oh my
if you didn't have a coalition of oil-producing or petroleum-producing countries, if that cartel was not there, would the price of gas be higher?
That's a very good point. Like, if you had a bureaucracy that removed the idea of illegal cabals, that's what it would be. Like, you wouldn't be able to have Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Microsoft all join a company and say, like, okay, now we name the price for data. That wouldn't work. That would be what you call collusion, and that's illegal. But not illegal on the international stage. But that would be illegal under a one world stage, where that would be like, okay, you can't do that anymore. You can't just fix your price, have the monopoly on oil. Man, I don't know how that would work, because now suddenly it wouldn't be countries and nation states competing against oil. It would just be their Shells and your BPs competing on oil prices.
Yeah, they would have to buy it at a certain price and compete with themselves, which they aren't doing now because they're in with OPEC.
Right. So actually that would be better, because then if you have any semblance of U.S. law, you could have antitrust laws on an international level to be like, listen, Google, you own 99% of the market, you have to be broken up now. Or Shell, you own 85% of the market, you have to be broken up now.
And if you extrapolate that to other industries that countries need to function, which they would have to function in order to be part of this world economy, what else does that do? Are you going to have exploitive electrical companies and energy companies? No, because they're held up to a standard.
From the point of view of these business owners, all you're doing to these guys is saying, oh, so you
can exploit your capital.
No, you're hobbling me, is what they'd say. So you're taking away my right to earn a living or whatever.
I'm taking away your right to exploit a necessity.
Yeah, but that's how they would see it. It's like, well, why am I
and that's my counter argument.
Why am I even working hard?
I am patching the game so you can't use the cheat
so there would be no tax havens, right? There would be no, like, Panama paper crap.
Yeah.
That's the mentality of the business owner. Because they want to...
And if I haven't made it abundantly clear, fuck the rich. They are the problem with this world.
They are.
Not me, though. And not ways. You. And not Sarah. Like, the people richer than us. They're the problem.
We're not rich.
I'm fucking poor.
We're not rich.
I have a college degree and rent.
I have money, which is great, but I'm not rich.
I'm going to put on my conservative hat, not libertarian hat, and I'm going to...
That's what I was doing.
Oh my god, you have one of those blue mega hats.
Let me pass it over. Here you go.
All right, thanks, Sarah, for your well-kept and extremely warm hat of conservatism.
You won't believe it. Sarah threw a hat through the internet.
I did. Amazing. It's pretty great. I just
and
frisbeed
Phil did catch it. It was pretty funny.
Frisbeed it over.
I'm really good at frisbee. Okay. I'm going to wear this hat, and I'm going to say, listen, if you're in an industrialized country, you're probably in the top 10% easily. And that just really sucks, because that's just the truth. Where you have 3 billion people on this planet that are what we call food insecure, which is just a lovely way of saying starvation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially since America itself throws away billions of pounds of food a year.
Is it pounds
just
or
in
tons?
waste. That could go to people. Just to fucking people.
Or to pigs to make more food for people to waste more food.
Bacon.
Anyway.
Okay, yeah, this is a problem, because I often feel it's disingenuous when people say, like, oh, it's the real rich that are causing all these problems, which I don't disagree, but then people could say the same about us. Like, how far does this pecking order go down before you're like, oh, actually not me? Because for us in our lifestyle, for as affluent as it is or not, I don't really feel like I'm doing very well myself, but anyway, other people can clearly say, well, you're clearly doing better than the bottom 50%, possibly combined.
Hey, we have a roof over our heads, so I'm not...
This is kind of the...
With 50 years of progress, how much will that floor be raised?
Well, that's kind of what's happening already. Globalization as it is, where a lot of the people in the States are very upset that their jobs for making air conditioning units are going to China and Mexico. And then those jobs actually are going and shipping to further of South America and to other places in Asia, and eventually probably to the shores of Africa.
Oh, it's going to cycle back.
It's kind of like, I think we already mentioned this in previous podcasts, but China is one of the biggest investors of many of the countries that are in Africa, especially the areas that actually have some decent infrastructure. And if they don't, they're the ones that build it. And this really strange sense of colonialism by China isn't frowned upon compared to as it was back in the day of the European powers.
But it's not colonialism, because their exploitation is not inherently one-sided. They are bringing something to the table. They are Alexander the Greating it. They are not Cortez.
Cortez? From Spain?
Yeah, the Spanish Inquisition into Mexico.
Cortez.
Was that Cortez?
Cortez the Conqueror.
Yeah, because Cortez just went there, raped everything, and took it all away. Where Alexander the Great conquered a nation and was like, give me some taxes, we'll build you some roads, maybe an aqueduct or two, and then we're moving on.
Except for Thebes.
Like that.
Except for Thebes.
I mean, It was a different time,
You
but
made an example out of them.
Fuck thieves.
Okay, no, like that's what China is doing, and
we can ignore what he did to, Scythia and
I have
Babylon,
a question. And maybe I'm just remembering wrong historically, but didn't the United States heavily invest in China at one point where we were like, we're gonna have all of our goods and stuff made in China, which is why we have so many made in China things. Wasn't that
it was the great reopening under Nixon in the 70s.
Okay, maybe that was it. It was
because Maoism and communism really took over in the late 40s, early 50s, and that led up to Vietnam, because Vietnam was a proxy war between the USA and Russia.
Yep.
For the sake of the manufacturing basis of China.
So, is that similar to what China is doing then with Africa, or not at all?
what we're doing to China is
What we
we
did.
did and what China will be doing to other areas that need economic development. It's the same thing what we did to the British. So this idea of a slow trickle of globalization where countries like Cambodia and Vietnam, they're more developed than they've ever been before. Same with Taiwan and Japan and Korea. I think we mentioned this before, but who was the winner of the Vietnam War? And that was Korea. And who was the winner of the Korean War? Well, that was Italy and Japan, because they're the ones that are making the cheap weapons and equipment and war material. I mean, U.S. had no time for that. We're making wonderful leaded refrigerators. The idea that
Nuclear free.
you go to an area that has a semi-literate base for low-skill labor is all fun and games, because that's exactly what you would do, because you're exploiting their labor, but in exchange you're giving them, in board game speak, basic tier 1 things, which can easily ramp up to tier 10 things if you play your game cards right. Such as now you invented the wheel and literacy and law, but now you can actually start making wonderful things too, if you actually follow the tech tree correctly. And that's very possible if it wasn't for automation. You don't really need semi-skilled laborers anymore if you can have a robot do it all for you anyway. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the places you would see on Foxconn that make their iPads and iPhones, their designers are not interested in the design of the phone. Their designers are interested in the design of the machines that make the phone. That's their biggest constraint. I am kind of curious to see what will happen. Perhaps robotics is still too expensive. Perhaps it's still $1 billion just to invest for a simple Ford plant. So that's maybe why they would still want to go to somewhere that you only have to pay $1 a day. And maybe that's still good enough.
Well, but you also need the physical area for that.
Right.
I think the biggest economic driver to go to other countries is it's cheaper to buy land in Mexico for a car plant
right.
than it is to
Right. So it's
buy
still
it in
better and even more environmentally lax laws to do that. So I think that the idea that the common American and maybe even the sentiment of our fellow friends in United Kingdom have the feeling hey, our jobs are being outsourced. It's yeah, but on the grander scale of 2077, this would equalize. The idea that labor in Mexico would match labor in Canada, which would match labor in the United States, will happen by then, because it all will just keep rolling to the next low but semi-skilled populous country with land that is cheap and real estate that is cheap and tax that's affordable. I think that's true, but why haven't we seen that type of success everywhere?
Capitalism.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. So capitalism is still going to be...
No, because you need to exploit those countries that aren't on that same level playing field. And that's where capitalism shines, is it does nothing but exploit.
It's like a deadly virus. But in this...
that we just sort of ignore.
We kind of ignore.
But a vaccine's coming.
Don't impinge on our freedoms.
Don't tread on the snake.
Micah, why do I work? You're just going to hobble me with your max.
Sarcasm detected,
That
and the
was
sarcasm
the fourth time Max was said. That is the end of the episode. I am putting my foot down.
One last question, Micah. Is this new region-free region place? Is it gonna be capitalism still? Right? That's under my impression. That's still gonna be.
I was gonna say, hear me out. No money too.
God damn
no
it,
borders, no money. Forget it.
I don't see I can't see a future where there won't be an economic system that is tinged with a bit of capitalism. But it's to the degree and the percentage of the government and the life of its people based around that capitalism. That will change.
I can deal with that.
You can have a communist country that is capitalist, China.
We should have an atheist, capitalist, communist, socialist world.
Yes, and nothing you said was mutually exclusive.
Yep, all of it, all of it. Just all
nothing
of it
there
combined.
is exempting anything
With our
else.
powers combined, we are Captain
if
Planet,
you have
and that will be the nation
communist aspect
of the world.
The means of production are in the hands of people. Capitalism is you're still making goods to sell to other people, in exchange for the capital that other people make.
None of this makes any sense.
Socialized, but we should just put it all. We should just combine it all. Like we should get some power rings and then combine it, and just make it a better place.
And on our next episode, as we dive into Cyberpunk 2077, we will find out if the future atheist, anarchic, communist, capitalist, socialist state actually functions. Until then, this is your futurist, Isn't It Obvious podcast, signing off for, dear God, you're still listening?
I don't even know.
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom.